Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on Times Now. This is Nation Wants to Know and I'm Heena Gambhir. Viewers, the world's eyes are fixated on the bilateral talks between US President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And this is the 7th consecutive G7 summit that Prime Minister Modi is attending. Prime Minister Modi earlier held key bilateral meetings with several world leaders on the sidelines. And today the spotlight shifts to the bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and US President Donald Trump. Yesterday, it was the first time both leaders came face to face after 16 months. Last time these two leaders met, in fact, that happened in February 2025 at the White House in Washington, D.C., shortly after Donald Trump's inauguration. And then, because of a number of reasons, the relations nosedived, which is why there is enhanced focus on the bilateral this time between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump. The biggest issue is killing of 3 Indian sailors after American attacks on commercial ships in Omani waters just a week ago. Prime Minister Narendra Modi yesterday spoke about the issue during an address to the G7 leaders, and that included US President Donald Trump as well. And here's what the Prime Minister had said. He said that several Indian civilians lost their lives. Safety of seafarers is our responsibility. Seafarers connect nations via maritime trade. He said we must ensure sea routes remain secure. And he had said that seafarers should be able to work without fear. This is what the Prime Minister said yesterday. He also raised the issue of trust deficit when he was addressing the leaders, and he was sitting next to US President Donald Trump when he made these comments. Listening.
Hello, I'm the boss. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
How are you? Hello, I'm the boss. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
How are you?
And this is what US President Donald Trump said a short while ago. And now, in a light-hearted moment during G7 working lunch, US President Donald Trump praised Prime Minister Narendra Modi, describing him as calm, cool, and a total killer, while contrasting Modi's composure with his own style. And this is the latest update that we are getting at this point in time. This is what we have learned. He has, in fact, praised Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and this happened during the G7 working lunch. It was a light-hearted moment in which US President Donald Trump praised Prime Minister Modi. He described Prime Minister Modi as calm, cool, and a total killer, while contrasting Prime Minister Modi's composure with his own style. But now, clearly, the focus is going to be on what happens next, how the bilateral has been between both the leaders. And in fact, ahead of the Modi-Trump bilateral, US Ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, struck a positive note, saying he's always happy to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi and looks forward to the interaction. So this is the update that we are getting at this point in time. Sergio Gore signaling positive momentum there. Listen in.
We're very much looking forward to it. The President will be there in about half an hour. Always happy to see the Prime Minister. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We're very much looking forward to it. The President will be there in about half an hour. Always happy to see the Prime Minister. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We're very much looking forward to it. The President will be there in about half an hour. Always happy to see the Prime Minister. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We're very much looking forward to it. The President will be there in about half an hour. Always happy to see the Prime Minister. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Now, the question is, can this meeting, this bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and US President Donald Trump reset the strained ties? There is hope, but then there are dark clouds too. First up, when both met each other yesterday, they did not really share a hug. There was just a handshake. Now, this despite the mutual praise on social media over the last few months. Let's understand why And what are the key issues that both the leaders are expected to discuss? One, of course, is death of 3 Indian sailors just last week in Omani waters. Then you've got interim India-US trade deal as well. A lot of issues still need to be addressed on that front. Then tariff disputes continue. Apart from that, Iran and the energy security is another important aspect, because West Asia crisis has impacted oil importing countries very badly, and India is one of those. Then you've got the issue of H-1B visas and mobility as well. That is expected to feature in the talks, in the bilateral talks between both the leaders. Let's go across to my colleague Srinjoy Chaudhary, who is joining us live right now for more on this. Srinjoy, what's the update coming in from France? And the bilateral, I believe, was supposed to happen around 6:15. What's the update?
Yes, it's going to happen very shortly. But it's only a short meeting, unless, of course, both sides decide that it should be longer, because it's half an hour. And even usually in these meetings, particularly if both sides know each other, there are always exchanges of pleasantries. So that takes a bit of time. Then President Trump will be speaking in English. Now, both sides will probably have interpreters. That takes away a little more of the time. So there probably will be time for 2 or 3 substantial points to be made. Now, you would expect, as so many people have already said, you would expect the death of the 3 sailors would certainly come up, because Prime Minister knows that in India, that's the biggest issue. Everyone wants to know whether Prime Minister will bring it up or not. So that certainly is an issue. Then there are these interlinked economic issues, the trade deal, tariffs, plus also the price of oil. Now that, of course, also relates to the troubles with Iran. Now just think, if let's say 110 or 120 days ago, 4 months ago, did anyone imagine that the price of crude oil, which was about $70 a barrel, would shoot up to over $110, because we had the war that we had for 49 days and a very tenuous peace, when the prices of petroleum went up and down. It, as you said, has hurt the Indian economy, it's hurt the Chinese economy, it's hurt the Japanese economy. All oil importing countries have been hurt. Now, this is a point that you would expect Prime Minister to make.
Okay, we leave it there. Thank you very much, Srinjoy. Appreciate you joining us with your input on the story. Let's also welcome our guests who are joining us on the broadcast this evening. We have Kamal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, Dr. Brahmachelani, who is a strategic affairs expert. Also joining us is Anthony Renjuli, former Director for India, U.S. National Security Council during the Biden administration. Good evening to all of you. Thank you for speaking with us here on Times Now. Dr. Brahmachelani, to you first. Are we expecting too much from this bilateral that's going to happen between Prime Minister Modi and U.S. President Donald Trump?
The answer is yes. In India, we tend to focus too much on optics and on bilateral meetings. We tend to lose sight of the fundamentals. The US-India relationship has come under serious strain in the last 15 months, and things are not improving. For example, just today, just hours before this scheduled Modi-Trump bilateral, the US renamed its largest military command as the Pacific Command by dropping Indo. It was the Indo-Pacific Command, now it's become the Pacific Command. Again, it sends the wrong signal to New Delhi that India's salience in US policy under Trump's second presidency is on the decline. That's the wrong signal to send, because the US and India still share important strategic interests. But then we have the US president now trying to establish a modus vivendi with China. He has embraced Pakistan, and in India's other other countries in India's strategic backyard, like Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and even Nepal now. The US and Indian interests no longer converge. They diverge, in fact, quite strikingly. How can the US be India's strategic partner globally when the US is seeking to undermine India's interests in India's own immediate neighborhood? That's the most fundamental question that is facing India today.
Okay, interesting. Anthony, where do you stand? Talking about the signals here specifically, one, of course, as Dr. Brahmachalani mentioned just now, how, the name of US Command, US Pacific Command has been changed from US Indo-Pacific Command to now US Pacific Command, and that 2 hours before this bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump, the US President. Apart from that, when India raised the issue of the death of 3 Indian sailors in Omani waters, just see how US Secretary of State Marco Rubio responded to it. There was not even remorse that was expressed. Even that caught everyone's attention. So is there any reason to believe that these signals are not being given deliberately?
Thanks for having me. I don't think we should overstate the divergence between the United States and India, but I agree rather completely that the signals have been mixed, to say the least. It is was not a good message to take the action that the U.S. did, that the so-called Department of War did on renaming the Indo-Pacific Command to reverting to Pacific Command, a decision that had been made initially by the first Trump administration, by the way, to rebrand it, sending a signal of the importance of India and the Indian Ocean region to the United States' broader strategic interests, and India is a cornerstone of our Indo-Pacific strategy. So that does feel like a mixed signal to me. I don't necessarily think it's intentional. The business of foreign policy is often in the process, and it does feel like wires are getting crossed at the moment. Marco Rubio's visit to India, I think on balance, helped to initiate a process of rebuilding or re-strengthening U.S.-India relations, but there is a lot of work to do. Your newscaster, yourself, and my colleague, Dr. Chalabi, have outlined some of the challenges that are being faced right now. A lot of that, I think, comes down to consultation. That's why these meetings are important, even if their importance can sometimes be overstated. This is a short meeting on the margins of a multilateral conference. But nevertheless, it is important to maintain the connectivity between leaders, ministers, and at the working level. And that connectivity sometimes feels a bit uneven. And of course, understanding the challenges that India has faced in the region as a country, perhaps more than most, directly impacted by the conflict or the war with Iran. And so that's also important. And again, I think the messaging has been indeed uneven.
Okay. Dr. Chilani, messaging has been uneven is what Anthony has said, mixed signals, but not intentional. Do you agree with that part, that these signals are not intentional? I mean, why would otherwise the name will be, changed just hours before this crucial bilateral?
Well, first,
if that is directed at me,
Dr. Chilani first, and then you.
Please, Doctor.
Okay. As far as Trump is concerned, nothing is clear in his second presidency. His muddled approach, his blow hot, blow cold approach, always sends mixed signals, and he has alienated most of America's allies. Today, the U.S. is not very popular across the world, and the strains in the relationship with India those strains are only one facet of how U.S. foreign policy today is facing formidable challenges, even with respect to its own long-standing allies. But to answer your question on India, the issue is this, that ever since Trump returned to the White House, there have been developments one after another that suggest that despite his model approach, he seems to be rethinking his India policy strategically. He gave India the pride of place in his first term Indo-Pacific strategy. Clearly, he is now undoing that and renaming the Indo-Pacific Command as Pacific Command is just one instance of how this rollback is happening. For example, the embrace of Pakistan or his effort to reach a modus vivendi with China. If you're pursuing a more conciliatory approach toward China, obviously, the free and the whole Indo-Pacific strategy that stood on free and open Indo-Pacific approach, that of course no longer then becomes sustainable in a key sense, because you are trying to build a modus vivendi with Beijing, and we saw during Trump's recent visit to Beijing, where he for the first time, in a way tacitly at least, accepted China as a peer equal of United States. Until now, China was seen in the US as a near peer.
Yes.
But for the first time, this visit cemented China's transformation as America's peer. And I think that is a very important change, because if his policies on China and Pakistan have changed quite dramatically, it's not a surprise that India's salience in Washington may be on the decline.
Okay. Anthony, do you think it's probably because of the growing proximity between US and China, US and Pakistan, that we are seeing no attempts also being made by Americans to really mend the ties? I mean, of course, the visit of US Secretary of State Marco Rubio to India was high on optics. We all remember that phone call of US President Donald Trump, where he reiterated how much he loves India, Prime Minister Modi, and Indians specifically, how Indians can really bank on him 100%. But, actions are not really matching what we are seeing happening.
Yeah, I agree with that. Look, I was a diplomat for more than 2 decades, and much of my work had been done working in India and in South Asia. I concluded as a director for India at the National Security Council, and the job was to coordinate across the large interagency team in the United States the work of advancing the strategic partnership with India across all of its domains. Which is a big job. The US and India had been and continue to partner on a very broad agenda. Occasionally, things could fall out of place. It does feel more often than not that the messages are mixed. I don't have any reason to doubt the sincerity of the president when he praises Prime Minister Modi. I think Ambassador Gore is, again, sincere in the enthusiasm and energy that he brings in trying to advance this partnership, including the technology partnership between the US and India. But it does feel like the broader process is misfiring. It's not only on foreign policy, of course, this happens in administrations, and it's happened in this one. But again, to come back to the example that we've been discussing, the renaming having been announced yesterday, whether or not that had been coordinated across the interagency and those that had responsibility for teeing up a successful encounter between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of India, I just don't know. It would seem to me that consultation is important.
Okay.
I don't know whether that happened as well and whether those discussions had taken place with India in advance of an announcement like this. So that's kind of where I'm coming back to, and not wishing to read in a systemic or systematic effort to downgrade relations. But look, last thing I'd say on this is, I think the business of strengthening our Indo-Pacific partnerships had been core to United States strategy in the region, and the U.S.-India strategic partnership had been a cornerstone of that effort. But whether it's Japan, Korea, or India,
Right.
it feels like this effort and this has been frayed
Right.
over the last year.
Okay.
Despite the efforts of many in the administration, I think,
Right.
to try to keep things going.
All right, we leave it there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate both of you for joining us with your perspective on this. We will slip into a very, very short break, but viewers, don't go anywhere. We'll bring you all the latest updates from France about Modi-Trump bilateral. Stay with us.